Are you searching for answers to difficult family issues? Then you will be blessed by Counsel for the Heart, a program that brings hope and encouragement to the family. Psalm 147:3 says, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." Join Junie Lawson, Bible Instructor for White Horse Media, in today's program titled Dealing with Anger.
Welcome to Counsel for the Heart. I'm Junie Lawson with White Horse Media. In this series, we'll discuss issues that affect the family. My goal is to inspire faith, hope, and courage in facing life's challenges. I plan to share with you from my own personal experience, as well as my experience as a Bible instructor for the past 19 years. Often while giving a Bible study, I had opportunity to help someone with their problems through sharing from my experience as well as following Bible principles and guidelines. As we near the second coming of Jesus, Satan is increasing his attack on the family. It is my hope and sincere prayer that this series will provide tools that will be a benefit and a blessing to you and to your family and help you and give you courage to press on to that great day. You've no doubt noticed that we're living in an age obsessed with anger and rage. The anger management business is exploding. There are books, videos, DVDs, seminars, chat rooms, all kinds of things that demonstrate the need for help in this area. Anger is escalating in today's world, as is evidenced on the roads, in the workplace, in schools, homes, social gatherings, parking lots, and so on. But before we go further into this topic, would you pray with me? Father in heaven, we realize that we're living in a world that is filled with anger, and we're sorry for that. And we ask your specific help today in this program. Lord, I know that there are some people watching who have a lot of feelings of anger and struggle with that, or maybe they're being subjected to somebody else's anger and trying to deal with that. So we ask for your help, for your spirit and your power to be with us and bless in this program. In Jesus' name. Amen. Not long ago, I was in a grocery store parking lot and looking for a place to park, as you've all been there a few times, I'm sure. I saw somebody backing out, and it was fairly close to the store, which was a bonus. That doesn't happen too often. So I pulled right into that parking spot. Just at that moment, a woman in an SUV came along. She stopped right behind me. She had her window down and her hand out. She was yelling at me and waving at me with her middle finger. The light dawned and I realized that she had been waiting for this spot. So I jumped out of my car, walked right over to her, and I said, "I am so sorry. I did not realize you were waiting for this spot. If you'll give me just a moment, I'll back my car out, move to another place so you can have this spot." Well, then her facial expression changed. She looked a little sheepish and she said, "Oh, no, that's okay. I'm sorry, I'll find another spot." Well, I was relieved, but you never know when rage or anger is going to strike someone. Least of all, do you expect it in a grocery store parking lot? Anger is a normal human emotion, and it's something that we will expect to have from time to time. So the real issue is not that you feel anger or are tempted to anger, but it's how you react and how you respond when you feel angry. Recent statistics on anger show that 65% of office workers have experienced some rage within the office. Approximately 1 million workers are injured each year in violent attacks by coworkers. Often, this escalates into murder and sometimes involving bystanders. 45% of staff regularly lose their temper at work. 65% of people express anger over the phone, 26% in writing, and 9% face-to-face. 1 in 4 drivers admit to committing an act of road rage. According to safeyouth.com, more than 1 in 3 high school students, both male and female, have been in a physical fight. 1 out of 9 of these have been injured to the point where they had to seek medical attention. What happens to us physically when we're angry? Well, usually the blood pressure goes up, the heart rate goes up. Also, the level of energy hormones and adrenaline increases. The face might become flushed and the blood vessels stand out. The cause? Anger can be triggered by a number of things. It might be internal or external. Sometimes an unpleasant memory will trigger anger. Being cut off by another car on the road or in a parking lot might be that which triggers anger. Anger is frequently caused by frustration about not getting what we want, which we might also call selfishness. It can be triggered by the feeling that others don't respect our feelings, demanding or unrealistic expectations. Feelings of hurt or fear may cause anger. Experiencing loss or the death of a loved one. Personal needs not being met or anxiety. Family background and inherited tendencies, or a pressured lifestyle. Can another person say or do something to make me angry? Well, what they say or do might make me feel angry, but the truth is, no one can make me angry. Anger results from how a person feels and how he views what has just taken place. Dallas Willard, a philosophy professor, says this about anger. It's a feeling that seizes us in our body and immediately impels us toward interfering with and possibly even harming those who have thwarted our will and interfered with our life, unquote. This really hits on the heart of the issue. We've probably all seen a child have a temper tantrum. Children have temper tantrums because they don't get their own way, and thereby their will is thwarted or frustrated. Generally, with adults, when they have problems with temper and anger, they haven't learned yet to control their own feelings and emotions, and they haven't maybe learned to express their anger in a way that is not going to be harmful to another person. Some people tend to cling to their anger even when the initial feelings have passed. They even may become addicted to the adrenaline rush produced by their anger. Professor Willard makes another interesting statement. Quote, "Energy is dedicated to keeping the anger alive. We constantly remind ourselves of how wrongly we have been treated. And when it's allowed to govern our actions, of course, its evil is quickly multiplied in heart-rending consequences and in the replication of anger and rage in the hearts and bodies of everyone it touches. Until I did the study for this program, I had never thought about anger being an addiction." Can anger be controlled? Well, some people may say that they can't control their anger. It just happens and that's the way it is. But the truth is, anger can be controlled. It's a learned response, and it's up to us to choose and use the proper methods for expressing our anger. That's the next question. Should anger ever be expressed? Some of the experts advise that we should always express our anger, that it's a danger to keep it bottled up inside, and that if we keep it bottled up, we might become bitter and hostile and be destroyed from the inside. However, should we choose to express our anger, it's our responsibility to express it in a way that will be constructive and not destructive toward others. Some feel that all anger is unhealthy, but that's not the case. There are times when anger is appropriate. Here's two illustrations. Number one, it may motivate us to take action against injustice. I don't know about you, but when I read about or hear about people without a conscience that hurt, abuse, and even murder children, my blood feels like it's about ready to boil. That really makes me feel angry inside. Jesus demonstrated what we call righteous indignation. When he was in the temple, he went to the temple, and there he saw men who were exploiting the people who had come to the temple for worship. So Jesus made a whip and drove them out of the temple. He said this, "Take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a place of business." And I believe when he said those words, he had a tone of anger in his voice. While it's right to be angry over injustice and sin, at the same time we must remember that there's a huge difference between righteous indignation and uncontrolled rage. And second, anger may be your final defense against someone who's attempting to manipulate, control, or otherwise injure you. Here are some symptoms that may help you recognize if anger is a problem in your life. It affects your health. Others distance themselves from you. You lose valued relationships. Episodes of anger become more frequent. You become outraged or violent and struggle sometimes with depression. Now let's look at what triggers anger. A trigger is something that pushes our buttons. Here's a few possible ones. Someone playing loud music that you dislike, being interrupted while you're talking. Maybe it's your teenager who comes in too many times after curfew, or perhaps your husband or wife comes home late night after night. Might be getting cut off in traffic, or someone's irresponsible behavior. I want to encourage you to find out what are the triggers that might set you off and cause you to feel angry. This is a good first step in dealing with anger. We have a short break coming up, but when we return, we're going to discuss 4 methods for keeping anger at bay and 3 ways that a person expresses anger. Welcome back to Counsel for the Heart and our program, Dealing with Anger. In the last section, we looked at some sobering statistics, some causes for anger, and identifying triggers. Next, I want to share with you 4 simple methods for keeping anger at bay. Number 1, relaxation. Try doing deep breathing, where you breathe in as deep as you can and then blow out through your mouth. And do that several times, slowly, very slowly. The purpose of that is to relax you and bring the body temperature down. The second one is time out. Sometimes we give our kids time out, but sometimes we need them as well. Take a walk or do some other type of exercise that will relieve your stress. And while you're doing that, contemplate the issue that's at hand that you're feeling upset about. Number 3, self-talk. Consider your thoughts. If you find that you have a lot of really negative, angry thoughts going on, then make a choice to change those to constructive thoughts. Also, one of the things you can do is claim 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5, and ask God to bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Number 4, pray. Talk to God about your anger. Tell Him how you're feeling. I remember one time when my husband and I were first married, and for some reason, I don't remember what it was now, but I was really upset and angry with him. As a matter of fact, I felt like I couldn't open my mouth because of what I might say. So I went to my room and closed the door, and I got on my knees and started praying. And I poured out my heart to God, and I told God how angry I felt and how upset I was about whatever had happened. And after a while, as I kept pouring out my thoughts and my feelings, the Lord calmed me down, and eventually I realized that I was probably overreacting, and being angry in this situation and saying things that I was thinking at first wouldn't have helped to bring resolution at all. So I thank God that He can give us that peace in our hearts when we talk to Him about it. Typically, there are 3 main ways that a person expresses anger. Number 1 is aggressive. This is where the anger is expressed emotionally, physically, or psychologically. There may be hitting, name-calling, yelling, other behaviors that are not constructive. It doesn't help the person that you're angry with, and it doesn't help you either. When you're the victim of your emotions, it might feel good to lash out at another person, but it doesn't bring the end result that you would want to have. In addition, aggressive behavior denies the rights of the other person to be treated with respect and dignity. Frequently, others are hurt by the aggressive behavior that we might bestow upon them, so to speak. Second is suppressing or non-assertive. This is when we hold our feelings inside, and sometimes that can result in passive-aggressive behavior. Anger is still expressed, but indirectly. maybe through sarcasm, through pointed jokes, or withdrawal. Suppressing anger allows us to avoid responsibility for our anger, but it does not allow for resolution. This could also result in someone being chronically angry and having a cynical attitude. Unfortunately, this type of attitude, this type of dealing with it, may cause many problems in your interaction and relationship with others. Number 3, expressive or assertive. In this case, you express your feelings assertively and constructively. This is the most effective way to deal with anger. When you express anger assertively, you're enabled to explain what you need, how you are feeling in a way that the other person can hear without giving them a tongue lashing. Remember that assertive doesn't mean being demanding or coming on strong. It means speaking clearly what your needs are. If we want someone to hear and be willing to meet our needs, we need to remember to treat them with respect. Now I want to talk a little bit about problem solving. Effective problem solving begins with a discussion that is assertive but not aggressive. Remember, there's a distinct difference there. Be assertive, but don't be aggressive. Okay, first, identify the problem, then make statements that are clear and direct in a calm, non-threatening manner. Third, determine to remain calm even if the person that's speaking to you is yelling. Keep your voice down and use some of the techniques that we talked about earlier. When you communicate your anger assertively, there are 3 main points I want you to remember. This is what the other party needs to hear. They need to hear that you are angry, why you are angry, and what you need them to do about it. Here's an important key in carrying this out. Make sure that when you communicate your message, you communicate it in a way where you express yourself clearly using I messages. We've talked about this before in other programs, but we want to remember to use an I message as opposed to a you message, which will likely cause the other person to be defensive because you messages blame the other party. Also, remain aware of the tone of your voice and your facial expression. Here's an example of a you message. I am sick and tired of you always interrupting me when we're around other people. Now, a typical response to that might be, well, you always interrupt me too. And can you see how quickly that could escalate into a full-blown argument? Now let's look at the same discussion following the principles that we laid down and using an I message. Last night when we were at our friend's house and I was talking, you interrupted me in the middle of my sentence, and before I was able to complete my thoughts, I felt really frustrated and angry about that, and it made me feel like what I had to say wasn't important. So what I need from you is to remember not to interrupt me and not to get in on my conversation until I've at least had a chance to finish my thoughts. The response in this case would probably be, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to do that, and I'll try to do better. In some cases, you may reach a compromise if you have a mutual problem here. Maybe you'll say, well, we both feel frustrated because we interrupt each other. So let's try something like, if I interrupt you, you tap me on the arm, or if you find that I'm doing the interrupting, you tap me. Whatever works, but we can learn to communicate these things in ways that will be constructive. Here's another example of a you message. You're at the grocery store checkout stand, you're running late for an important appointment, and the cashier is busily talking to the person in front of you and moving as slow as you think is humanly possible. You can probably feel your blood starting to warm up and your blood pressure rate increase, and you're starting to feel angry. Now here's an example of a you message. You could say to the cashier, you are working so slow, you're going to make me late for my appointment. Well, obviously, do you see you're blaming the cashier? Let's consider an I message. You might say something like, I know you're working hard and you're probably very tired from a long day, but I have an appointment coming up and I'm running late. Is there anything you can do to help me get out here as quick as possible? I don't know about you, but I think the cashier would be more likely to respond positively to that I message. Another thing we want to remember is active listening. This is so important in making the person that you're talking to feel like you hear what they have to say. If they are expressing anger toward you or someone else, you can ask a question to clarify what they're really trying to say and what the feelings are behind that. Here's another example. Let's say your wife comes home from work and she's really angry and she's trying to communicate something about what happened with Sue at work. You're not quite clear on that. So you might say something like, what I think you're saying is that you're angry with Sue because she didn't get the paperwork sent in and now you're both going to miss out on the retreat. When you do this, when you communicate this way, it helps the other person to communicate how they feel without being shut down and express their anger in a more constructive way. It's also important that in this type of interaction that we really do listen attentively and that we try to hear the feelings behind the words and that we're listening in a way that we're not waiting to thinking about what we're going to say just as soon as they finish, but really hearing and caring what they feel and what they have to say. There are 3 main points in anger management. 1, prevention. That is, learning how to keep from getting angry when you're tempted. Number 2, control. Staying in control, not blowing up when you feel angry. And 3, problem solving. After you gain control of the angry feelings, then you move into problem solving and dealing with the matter in a constructive way. 2 Timothy 3, verses 1-5 talks about perilous times that are coming upon the world in the last days. And you can read that whole passage, but specifically I wanted to mention in verse 3, one of the characteristics, one of the unholy characteristics in the last days is no self-control. And would you say that exploding anger and rage comes under that? Yes, I would say that it does. In Colossians 3, verse 8, Paul is talking about believers in Christ when he says, "But now you also put them all aside, anger, wrath, malice, slander, and abusive speech from your mouth." Galatians 5:20 identifies outbursts of anger as one of the deeds of the flesh, while verse 23 says that self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. The 6th commandment, written by the finger of God, says, "You shall not kill." Jesus, while speaking to his disciples, expounded on this in Matthew 5, verses 21 and 22, when he said, "You have heard that it was said in former times, you shall not kill. But," he said, "I say unto you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause is in danger of the judgment." Well, you may be thinking, I always have a cause when I'm angry. I always have a reason. That's not the point. We may have a reason, but the problem is that our anger too often is self-centered. And what Jesus is implying here is anger against sin or against some innocent party who's being hurt or wounded in some way. We recognize that uncontrolled anger or rage may often lead to murder. Now, there are some cases where a person doesn't follow through with that. They don't commit murder, but it doesn't mean that they might not wish that other person dead. And in this, he or she violates God's command to us to love one another as God has loved us. Yet the question remains, how do we overcome when we're tempted to anger or rage? As stated earlier, we must first accept responsibility for our anger, recognize it as sin, and take responsibility for it. You've heard me quote this verse before, but I want to share it again with you now. It's James 1, verses 19 and 20, and it says, "So then, my beloved brothers, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God." I paraphrased it, memorized it, and say it this way: Lord, help me be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger, for the anger of Junie does not produce the righteousness of God. Here's the key to victory. We need to pray to God. We need to confess to Him our anger, admit that we have a problem with anger or that we are tempted to it at all, and then confess our expressing it in unkind ways. We need to tell God that we want to have victory over it and ask Him to bring to your mind at the very moment that you're being tempted to become angry, that He will bring to your mind a promise from the Bible and remind you to call upon Him, and He will give you that victory. Proverbs 15:1 says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." I remember one time I was in a situation where a person was yelling at me, and I applied this verse and I spoke very softly, and eventually the other person calmed down and lowered the voice as well. Proverbs 19:11, "A man's discretion makes him slow to anger, and it's his glory to overlook a transgression." Have you ever thought about that? You can just, if somebody offends you, you can just overlook it. You can let it go. You can forget it, and you can forgive it. In closing, I want to share a short statement with you. An indwelling Savior makes His power our property. Christ's presence in the heart is a vitalizing power, strengthening the entire being. Isn't that a beautiful thought, an encouraging, inspiring thought? When we're connected to Jesus, we're connected to all the power of heaven. It's my prayer for each of you, for myself, for all of us, that we'll take hold of God's power and that He will give us victory over anger in our lives.